Hi there, friends. Before most folks in Coyote Ridge have even poured their first cup of coffee, a wild drama is unfolding by Willow Pond. In the stillness of dawn, a desperate bobcat is fighting for her life. Trapped, exhausted, so close to giving up. And just when hope seems lost, a retired teacher named Maggie rows quietly through the mist, about to make a choice that will change them both forever. If you've ever wondered what it means to risk your heart for something wild, or to find healing in the most unexpected places, this story is for you. Share your thoughts below, hit like or subscribe if it moves you, and let's dive right in. There's a stillness in the early morning air, a kind of silence that hums, a chill clinging to the weeds and the mud. If you're the kind who's ever risen before the sun, you know this feeling. The world hasn't quite decided to wake up yet, and every sound seems louder, more important. In that half-light, something moves, thrashes, by the water's edge. Most would miss it, hidden behind reeds and a tangle of fallen branches, but if you look close enough, you'll see her. A wild bobcat, fur spiked with mud, amber eyes wide and wild. Hazel, though no one in this town knows her name, not yet. She's trapped, deep in the cold, sucking mud, one leg buried past the knee, claws scrabbling for purchase, every muscle screaming with the effort. Her sides heave, breath coming faster and faster as panic settles like a stone in her chest. You could almost think she's part of the landscape, just another shadow under the willows. But look closer. Her ears flick, listening for predators, for help, for anything. The mud drags at her with each movement, like hands pulling her under. Her heart is a drumbeat, pounding a rhythm of survival. Fight, fight, fight. It's so raw, so real, you'd swear you could feel it through the soles of your boots if you stood close enough. The pond doesn't care. It reflects the sky, pink and pale, as if it doesn't see the struggle happening in its arms. There's a thin layer of mist drifting above the water, swirling as Hazel flails, her paws splashing, claws finding nothing but cold, unyielding earth. Her breath clouds in the air, turning frantic as the mud tightens its grip. A crow calls from a sycamore, sharp and harsh. A witness, maybe, or just another indifferent bystander. Hazel's thoughts are wild things, darting in every direction. Instinct tells her to escape, but the mud is merciless. She hisses, jaws snapping at nothing, the taste of fear thick in her mouth. She tries to twist, to pull free, but pain lances up her leg. Each effort saps a little more of her strength, but she won't quit. Not yet. Have you ever seen a creature so close to the end, still fighting? I'll never forget that image. Time drags. Every second stretches long, filled with her panting, the soft ripple of water, the gentle hush of wind in the grass. But the struggle is changing. Her movements grow slower, weaker, as exhaustion bleeds through her body. If you listened, really listened, you'd hear the difference. The early sounds of battle giving way to a softer, more desperate silence. There's a question in the air, something unspoken. Is anyone out there who cares? The sun begins its slow climb above the horizon, painting everything gold. Light dances off the pond, bright and careless. Somewhere in town, a truck rumbles to life. A dog barks. Someone flips on a kitchen light. But here, on the bank, Hazel is alone. The world is waking up, but for her, the fight is narrowing to a single thought. Survive. Please, just survive. Her body trembles with the cold. She tastes blood in her mouth, sharp and metallic, bitten tongue maybe, or a split lip from when she thrashed against a root. Her vision blurs, the edges going soft. This is the moment. Right here. The razor's edge between life and death, hope and surrender. It would be so easy to let go, to slide under and let the mud have its way. But something stubborn, something fierce keeps her clinging. And then faint, so faint she almost doesn't register it. There's a new sound. Oars in water, the creak of old wood, a human voice humming low, out of tune. Footsteps crunch on gravel, closer, closer, until a shape appears at the edge of the pond. Hazel's ears flatten, a last surge of adrenaline surging through her tired frame. Friend? Foe? She doesn't know. She only knows she's exposed, vulnerable, and this new arrival could mean salvation or a final blow. The figure pauses. The air is thick with tension. You can almost taste it. A mix of curiosity, fear, the possibility of change. Someone will cross Hazel's path this morning. But whether that's rescue or something else, well, that's not clear yet. If you were standing there, heart in your throat, watching the wild meet the human, you'd feel the weight of it. The moment where two lives, two entirely different worlds, are about to collide, and all you can do is hold your breath and wonder what will happen next. We always think of dawn as a beginning, but sometimes it's just a test. Out there by Willow Pond, with the mud clinging and the wild heart refusing to give in, Hazel's test has only just begun. If you had asked Maggie O'Donnell 10 years ago what would get her out of bed before sunrise, she might have said nothing short of an earthquake. These days, though, the ache of old memories is enough. It's a morning ritual now. Maggie slips into her boots, tugs on her faded blue coat, and rows out to Willow Pond, just as the world is soft and silent. She tells herself it's for the air, the view, the way the water glows gold in the first light. But the truth is, she's rowing toward the past, chasing ghosts that never quite leave her alone. Maggie's house sits at the edge of Coyote Ridge, far enough from town that she can pretend the rest of the world isn't breathing down her neck. Some folks call her a recluse. Others say she's still grieving the husband she lost and the son who grew up too fast. Maybe they're right. The quiet is heavy in her home, pressing in around family photos and stacks of old lesson plans from her teaching days. Out here, on the pond, the loneliness feels honest, like an old scar she can touch. Today, as Maggie's boat glides over the glassy water, she hums a lullaby she barely remembers, the one her mother used to sing when storms rattled the windows. The oars make gentle ripples, soft and steady, and she lets her mind drift, thinking of nothing in particular. That's when she hears it, a sharp, ragged cry, animal but almost human in its desperation. It cuts through the morning hush, makes her blood run cold. She grips the oars tighter, heart pounding in her chest. She tries to tell herself it's nothing. Just a fox, maybe, or a raccoon in trouble. There are plenty of wild things out here. Best not to get involved. But the sound comes again, shrill and full of pain, and Maggie feels something twist inside her. That's a creature fighting for its life, she thinks. And it's close. For a moment, she sits frozen in the boat, torn between fear and something she can't quite name. Common sense says stay away. She's heard the stories. Wild cats around here can be dangerous, unpredictable. She's a retired teacher, not some hero from a wildlife documentary. What would you do? She wonders, her gaze flicking to the pond's edge. Would you risk your own safety for an animal you can't even understand? The memories come, sharp as broken glass. The son she couldn't save from heartbreak, the husband she lost to cancer, the stray kitten she tried and failed to nurse back to health one winter. Maggie's lost count of the things she's tried to save. Most times she ended up with nothing but scars and empty hands. Still, something in her refuses to look away now. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's the last scrap of her heart that hasn't gone numb. She rows closer, the boat scraping against reeds. The mud at the shoreline is treacherous, thick and dark. Maggie stands, careful, knees aching with age and nerves. She sees the bobcat then, a wild, mottled shape, half submerged, one paw swiping helplessly at the air. The animal's eyes meet hers, and for a split second, Maggie feels the world narrow to just the two of them. Fear, pain, wildness. She doesn't know which of them feels it more. Maggie hesitates. Every instinct screams at her to back away, to let nature take its course. Who is she to interfere? But then she remembers her late husband's voice, steady and calm. You can't help everyone, Mag, but you can always try. She takes a shaky breath, pushes through the brambles, mud squelching under her boots. The bobcat growls, ears flat, teeth bared. Maggie's heart is a snare drum in her chest. She talks low and soft, not sure if the animal understands, but needing to fill the space with something besides fear. Hey there, girl. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. Her own voice surprises her, gentle but fierce. She edges closer, hands out in front of her. The animal's golden eyes never leave her. For a moment, the whole world feels suspended. Maggie, the bobcat, the rising sun, the hush before a choice that will change everything. Maggie can feel her old fears pressing in. Fear of pain, of failure, of doing more harm than good. But beneath that, there's another feeling, one she hasn't tasted in a long time. Courage. She kneels at the edge of the mud, letting herself feel the gravity of this moment. She could walk away, pretend she never saw, and no one would blame her. But she can't. There's a reason she can't turn her back on this creature, and it's more than kindness. Maybe it's the echo of every living thing she's tried to save, or maybe it's the ache of her own loneliness calling out to something wild and hurting. She glances at her hands, steady now, despite everything. She wipes a tear from her cheek and mutters, "Well, Maggie O'Donnell, let's see what you're made of." She inches forward, the pond's cold breath curling around her ankles. The bobcat's breath rasps, eyes flicking from her hands to her face and back. Maggie swallows hard. There's no telling how this will end. But in this moment, she chooses to try. She chooses compassion over fear. As Maggie steps closer, you can feel everything about to change. The pond, the sun, the air itself, charged with possibility and risk. Moments like these, do we ever really know what we're capable of until we're tested? Somewhere behind her, the world goes on, oblivious. But here, at the edge of the pond, the wild and the human hold their breath, waiting for what comes next. If you've ever tried to help a hurt animal, you know the fear cuts both ways. There's the terror in the creature's eyes, the trembling in its limbs, and there's the matching tremor in your own hands, the voice inside your head whispering, "Are you making it better, or just making it worse?" That's the place where Maggie O'Donnell finds herself, kneeling in cold mud at dawn, every muscle in her aging body taut with caution, every nerve ending screaming, "Careful." Hazel, the bobcat, is a tangle of fight and exhaustion. Her mottled fur is streaked with wet earth, blood oozing from a shallow gash on her shoulder, maybe from a desperate scramble against a hidden root. Her breath rattles in her throat, a strange, choking sound. The scent of human, soap, sweat, something floral, mingles with the wild musk of fear and pain. Hazel's instincts flare. Humans mean danger. They're the source of loud noises, snapping traps, stinging scents. She tries to hiss, but it comes out broken and weak. Maggie talks as she moves, her voice low and steady, the way she used to soothe nervous students before a big exam. Easy now. I'm right here. Not gonna hurt you. She unbuttons her old raincoat, the one her husband gave her for their anniversary years ago, and drapes it over Hazel's exposed flank. The coat is faded, patched at the elbows, soft from hundreds of washes. It smells like home, like comfort, and maybe that helps a little. Or maybe it's just the sound of Maggie's voice, threading through the cold. Her hands tremble as she edges closer. She's as scared as Hazel, though she hides it behind steady words and practiced motions. The ground is slick, mud pulling at her knees and shins, but she ignores it. She focuses on the task. Free the trapped leg, avoid the claws, don't make any sudden moves. The bobcat's body tenses at each touch, flinching as Maggie gingerly digs at the mud around her limb. Come on, sweetheart. You're stronger than this mud, I know it, Maggie whispers, not sure if she's talking to Hazel or herself. Every inch is a battle. Hazel's muscles coil and jerk, her tail flicking weakly, but her strength is fading. She's past the point of lashing out. Now she just wants it to be over. Time stretches. Maggie loses herself in the rhythm of her own breathing, the gentle encouragements, the careful digging. She remembers a winter long ago, when her son's puppy caught its paw in a fence. The same helpless ache, the same stubborn hope. She kept saying, "You're okay, I got you," even when she didn't believe it herself. Slowly, painfully, the mud gives way. Maggie slides her fingers under Hazel's leg, feeling for breaks. The limb is slick, trembling, but whole. The bobcat whimpers, her eyes fixed on Maggie's face. Confusion, distrust, but something else too. A spark of recognition. Or maybe just the simple, wild logic, pain is lessening. Maggie lifts the raincoat, ready for Hazel to bolt, but the animal collapses instead, sides heaving. She's too spent to run, too hurt to fight. Maggie's heart aches at the sight. The wild creature, once so fierce, now so vulnerable in her hands. She glances around. No one in sight. Just a crow watching from the branches. A silent witness to the morning's drama. Maggie wipes mud from her forehead with the back of her sleeve. "Well, girl, looks like it's just us," she murmurs. Very gently, she gathers Hazel's limp body, careful to keep the claws and teeth away from her skin. The bobcat is surprisingly light, all bone and sinew under the wet fur. Maggie tucks Hazel against her chest, wrapping her in the raincoat. Hazel doesn't protest. She's beyond fear now, drifting in and out of consciousness. Maggie's heart thuds in her ears as she stumbles back to her boat. Every step a prayer that she won't slip and drop her precious burden. She sets Hazel on a folded blanket, arranging her so she can breathe. The animal's eyes flutter open and closed, golden and wild, locked on Maggie's face. "Hang on, girl. Just a little longer." The row back to Maggie's house is a blur. Oars splashing, heart pounding, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She can feel Hazel's shallow breaths through the coat, the rise and fall growing weaker with each minute. Maggie talks to her the whole way. Nonsense words, half-remembered lullabies, anything to fill the silence and keep her own fear at bay. When they reach the dock, Maggie carries Hazel inside. boots leaving muddy prints on the worn floorboards. Her house, usually so quiet and still, feels alive with urgency. She lays Hazel on an old quilt near the fireplace, builds up the embers, and wraps the bobcat in soft towels. The animal's body shakes, a tremor running from nose to tail. Maggie hurries to the kitchen, hands shaking, grabbing the emergency kit she keeps for stray animals. Gauze, antiseptic, a syringe of painkiller she prays is still good. She works fast, but gentle, cleaning the wound, bandaging the leg. Hazel tries to snap at her once, a weak protest, but Maggie just smiles. "You've got some fight left. That's good." After what feels like hours, Maggie sinks onto the floor beside Hazel, back against the wall, exhaustion catching up to her. The bobcat's eyes track her, wary but calm. Maggie finds herself whispering, "We're both a little broken, aren't we?" She laughs, the sound trembling. If you've ever tried to save something wild, you know. Sometimes all you can do is sit with them in the quiet, letting hope and fear settle side by side. Outside, the sun climbs higher, the day starting as if nothing extraordinary has happened. But inside Maggie's small house, two survivors rest, uncertain, battered, but alive. Inside Maggie's small, cluttered house, the world felt impossibly far from Willow Pond and its merciless mud. The old walls, painted pale green and crowded with photographs and knickknacks, offered a comfort Hazel had never known. It was too bright, too warm, and every inch reeked of the unfamiliar. Yet here she was, a wild creature, curled beneath a faded patchwork quilt, her leg freshly bandaged, her breathing shallow but steady. Maggie moved quietly through her kitchen, fixing a bowl of water and searching for something Hazel might eat. The old woman's hands still shook from the adrenaline, but her mind was sharp. She recalled stories from her childhood, about animals who brought luck or warning, about the responsibilities of caring for something wild. Now, with Hazel trembling in the next room, those tales didn't seem so distant. Maggie set the bowl near Hazel, careful not to crowd her. She crouched a few feet away, keeping her posture small and her movements gentle. Hazel watched with wide, golden eyes, muscles tense and ready to spring, even as exhaustion kept her grounded. The space between them was thick with silence, a standoff between two survivors, neither certain what came next. The house was filled with echoes of Maggie's past. Photographs of a young man in a graduation gown, a husband beaming in a suit, her own younger self, smiling with a cat in her arms. Those images were bittersweet now, reminders of all she had lost. As she sat quietly, Maggie found herself flashing back to those who had left her. A son who had moved to the city and never truly come back. A husband lost to cancer so quickly it still felt like a bad dream. She wondered if grief and kindness grew from the same root inside her, a stubborn plant thriving on heartache and hope. Hazel's nose twitched. She eyed the water, ears flicking, but didn't dare move closer. Maggie offered a soft, encouraging word, but didn't push. She remembered a lesson from her teaching days. You can't force trust. You have to earn it, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully. A clock ticked in the hallway, marking the long minutes. Sunlight crept across the wooden floor, warming Hazel's fur. She sniffed the air, catching the scent of human, of wood smoke, of faint lavender from a sachet on the mantel. It was nothing like the pine and earth of her old world. Her body told her to run, to find the familiar cover of branches and the safety of solitude, but her injuries anchored her in place. Maggie watched, heart twisting at Hazel's confusion. She could see the questions in the animal's eyes. What is this place? Who are you? Can I trust you? Maggie found herself asking similar questions, though her gaze lingered on the past, on the empty chair at the kitchen table, the phone calls that never came, the promises that time refused to keep. Hazel tried to rise once, but the pain shot through her leg like lightning. She snarled, a low, broken sound, and sank back into the quilt, trembling. Maggie flinched, feeling a pang of helplessness, but refused to let it show. She steadied her voice and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. Nobody's going to hurt you here." She didn't know if Hazel understood, but it was all she could offer. The day wore on slowly. Maggie moved through the house in a gentle orbit, tending the fire, tidying dishes, keeping a watchful eye on her guest. She brought a can of tuna, opened it, and slid it closer to Hazel, careful to avoid sudden movements. Hazel sniffed at the food, finally taking a few cautious bites, never letting her gaze leave Maggie's face. Outside, wind rattled the windows. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance, and Hazel's ears flattened with a fresh surge of fear. Maggie closed the curtains, blocking out the outside world. "Just us for now," she murmured. As evening settled, Maggie sat at the edge of the living room, knitting absently, her mind wandering through old memories. She remembered holding her son when he was small, his hair damp from the bath, his head heavy against her shoulder. She remembered reading stories to her husband by the fire, their laughter mingling with the crackle of the flames. Sometimes she thought the ache of missing them would never dull. But tonight, with Hazel nearby, the loneliness seemed less sharp, softened by the presence of another living thing. Hazel, for her part, stayed watchful, never quite relaxing. Her instincts told her that safety was an illusion, that kindness could turn sharp in an instant. Yet as the hours passed and nothing bad happened, her breathing slowed, her body loosening ever so slightly. She tucked her nose beneath her paw, listening to the steady rhythm of Maggie's knitting needles, the low hum of the heater, the distant murmur of wind. Maggie wondered, not for the first time, what it was about saving something wild that eased the ache inside her. Was it the need to nurture, or simply a distraction from her own sorrows? Maybe it didn't matter. Grief and compassion, she thought, were two sides of the same coin, both rooted in a heart that still longed to love and be loved. As night deepened, Maggie set a pillow on the floor and settled down nearby. "I'll stay right here," she whispered, her voice threading through the darkness. "You're not alone." Hazel's eyes glowed in the faint light, wary but curious. She shifted, as if testing the boundaries of this new, strange world. The two of them, woman and wildcat, listened to the quiet together, each nursing old wounds and wondering if trust was possible, or if healing could ever reach that deep. For now, they had shelter, warmth, and the uncertain beginnings of connection. And that, Maggie thought as sleep tugged at her, was enough for one night. Dawn broke gray and cold over Maggie's house. Hazel lay curled on the edge of the quilt, one ear flicking as a breeze stirred dust motes in the beams of sunlight. For the first time in days, she was warm, dry, and safe from hunger, but nothing about recovery was easy. The wound on her leg throbbed with each twitch, and her body ached from the memory of mud and terror. Maggie's living room felt both sheltering and suffocating. Every sound, spoon clinking, floorboard creaking, kettle whistling, sent Hazel's nerves jangling. Maggie moved quietly, watching Hazel with the patient eye of someone used to coaxing nervous creatures. She spoke only when necessary, always in that same steady, gentle voice. "You need to eat, sweetheart. Here, try a bit of this." Sometimes Hazel accepted the food. Shredded chicken, leftover beef, a raw egg cracked into a bowl. Other times, she bared her teeth, tail lashing, refusing even to look Maggie's way. Maggie respected the boundaries, never pushing, always offering and then stepping back. The days blurred together, marked by slow, painful steps toward healing. Hazel grew stronger, her coat regaining its luster, her eyes brightening. She limped less, prowling the edges of the living room when she thought Maggie wasn't looking. The wood stove's warmth seeped into her bones, and at night she'd stretch out closer to the fire, lulled by the rhythm of Maggie's knitting needles or the quiet murmur of late-night radio. But nothing about this new world made sense. Hazel would awaken from uneasy dreams, convinced she'd heard the wind in the pines, only to find herself surrounded by four walls. Sometimes she'd bolt upright, wildness flaring, every muscle ready to flee. But there was nowhere to go. She found the windows and pressed her nose to the glass, leaving smudges and streaks. Outside was a world she could smell but not touch. Birds flashing past, squirrels racing along the fence line, the sharp tang of snow on the air. One morning, desperation overtook her. While Maggie was fixing tea, Hazel saw her chance. A door left ajar, cold wind curling around the frame. Hazel surged to her feet, ignoring the pain in her leg, and dashed for freedom. Her claws skittered on the linoleum, paws slipping as she launched herself toward the door. For one breathless second, she tasted hope. But her leg gave out halfway there, sending her sprawling. She crashed into the wall, pain exploding up her side. The noise startled Maggie, who rushed in, heart pounding. "Oh, Hazel, no, don't!" Maggie knelt beside her, not daring to touch, letting her voice do the soothing. Hazel snarled, pain and fear twisting together, but Maggie just waited, letting her settle, letting the storm inside both of them pass. After that, Hazel limped to the far corner of the room, curling up with her back to Maggie, tail twitching with frustration. Maggie surveyed the mess: broken lamp, scattered books, a line of muddy paw prints. She sank onto the couch, sighing. "You're not the only one who feels trapped, you know," she said softly. "Some cages aren't made of walls." For the first time, Maggie wondered if compassion could reach its limits. She had given everything she knew: food, warmth, gentle words. But sometimes Hazel's wildness flared so strong, Maggie questioned whether she was truly helping or simply prolonging the animal's suffering. Was she offering sanctuary or a new kind of prison? Maggie thought of her late husband, how he'd hated being fussed over in his last months, and how love, at its deepest, sometimes meant letting go. Just as Maggie was wrestling with her doubts, another problem landed on her doorstep. Literally. That afternoon, as she was tidying up, she heard a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Devlin from across the road, clutching her terrier and peering past Maggie's shoulder. "Maggie, dear, I heard strange noises last night. You haven't seen anything, have you? Folks are saying there's a wild animal in the neighborhood." Maggie hesitated, 1,000 explanations fluttering through her mind. "Just a stray cat," she said finally, but her voice was unconvincing. Mrs. Devlin narrowed her eyes. "Be careful, Maggie. People around here worry about their pets and their children." After Mrs. Devlin left, Maggie felt the weight of the world pressing in. Word was spreading: a wild bobcat right here in Coyote Ridge. Some neighbors were scared. Others remembered Maggie's kindness. But even sympathy could sour quickly if fear took root. Maggie's phone rang that evening, a neighbor suggesting animal control, someone else warning her to do the right thing. Every call tightened the knot in Maggie's stomach. That night, as Maggie sat by the fire with Hazel sprawled nearby, the old woman found herself asking hard questions. Was she helping Hazel, or just refusing to let go? Could kindness survive in a world quick to judge, slow to understand? Sometimes helping wasn't simple. Sometimes it was a struggle against fear. Hers, the neighbors, even Hazel's. Hazel watched Maggie with those amber eyes, head tilted as if weighing the same questions. For now, the uneasy truce held, wild and tame, each testing the boundaries of what it meant to trust, to heal, to hope. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and Maggie wondered how much longer this fragile peace could last. By the time the week was out, word had spread all through Coyote Ridge. Maggie O'Donnell had a wild animal in her house. At first, it was only whispers, nervous speculation at the bakery counter, concerned voices outside the post office, children pressing their faces to frosted windows as their parents hurried them along. But small towns have long memories and quick tempers, and soon those whispers grew sharp, slicing through Maggie's sense of sanctuary. Hazel, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond Maggie's walls, grew stronger with each passing day. The wound on her leg scabbed over, fur beginning to sprout around the edges. Her walk steadier. Yet the atmosphere in the house had changed. Tension hummed in the air, leaking in through cracks beneath the doors and settling into the floorboards. Maggie felt it in her bones, an ache that went deeper than the winter chill. One morning, as Maggie sipped her coffee, she noticed 2 pickup trucks parked at the end of her driveway. The drivers lingered, talking in low voices, casting wary glances at her house. Maggie's heart pounded. She closed the curtains and tried to keep her hands from trembling as she washed the breakfast dishes. Hazel, sensing her unease, prowled restlessly along the walls, ears flat, tail twitching. That afternoon, another knock rattled the door. This time, it was Mr. Peabody, a longtime neighbor who'd always waved from his porch but never come calling. He shifted from foot to foot, hat in hand, eyes darting past Maggie's shoulder. "Afternoon, Maggie. There's been talk." His voice was careful, but his meaning plain. "Folks are worried about pets and kids and, well, it's not safe having a bobcat loose." Maggie bristled. "She's not loose, she's recovering, and I'm doing everything I can to keep her away from trouble." Mr. Peabody sighed, gaze softening. "I know your heart, Maggie, but wild animals don't belong in houses. They belong out there." He nodded toward the gray expanse of foothills beyond the road. Behind Maggie, Hazel padded into view, watching the exchange with wary curiosity. Mr. Peabody's eyes widened. "She's beautiful, I'll give you that. But if anything happens, if someone's dog gets hurt or worse, folks won't just talk. They'll act." After he left, Maggie stood in the quiet for a long time, heart thudding. She knew he was right. Fear could make decent people do foolish things. She thought of the wildness in Hazel's eyes, the way she still startled at every loud sound. Could she really keep Hazel safe? Or was she risking not just the bobcat, but herself? It wasn't just the fearful who came knocking. 2 days later, a small group of Maggie's former students appeared, now grown, bringing a sack of groceries and kind words. "We heard about the cat," said Rosa, her face earnest. "My dad says you're brave, Miss O'Donnell. Not many would risk this for a wild animal." Maggie felt tears prickle at her eyes. Support, when it came, was a balm. Still, the pressure mounted. Animal Control left a bright orange notice on her mailbox. There were late-night phone calls from strangers, some full of sympathy, others sharp with threat. Maggie felt the strain in every bone, the lines around her eyes deepening, her voice growing weary. Hazel's health, too, began to falter under the weight of uncertainty. The house, once a place of healing, now buzzed with tension. She paced the rooms endlessly, rubbing her side raw against the corners. Her appetite waned, eyes losing some of their fire. Maggie tried everything, new foods, extra blankets, soft music, but nothing soothed Hazel's anxiety. The stress of confinement, the echo of Maggie's own fear, pressed down on them both. One evening, as snow swirled outside and the world felt impossibly small, Maggie sat by the fire. Hazel curled beside her, both seeking warmth they couldn't quite find. Maggie's thoughts ran in circles. How do you choose between doing what's right for a creature you love and bowing to the demands of the world? Is compassion just another word for foolishness when the price is so high? The town's debate grew more heated. Some neighbors, remembering Maggie's years of kindness, rescuing strays, reading to children, caring for her sick husband, rallied to her defense. They left baskets of food on her porch, called to check in, wrote letters to the local paper. Others were unmoved, their fear louder than their memories. At last, the decision was taken out of Maggie's hands. A white van, emblazoned with the state wildlife logo, pulled up one gray morning. 2 officers stepped out, calm but resolute. Maggie greeted them on the porch, her hands balled into fists inside her sleeves. "We're here for the Bobcat, ma'am. We'll make sure she gets the best care at the Wildlife Rehab Center." Maggie's voice broke. "She's not ready. She still needs time. She's not just an animal, she's family now." One officer, a woman about Maggie's age, put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The hardest kindness, sometimes, is letting go. You've done all you can." Inside, Hazel sensed the change. She shrank from the officers, eyes wild and round, body pressed tight to the hearth. Maggie knelt beside her, whispering, "I'm sorry, girl. I tried." Her tears fell, mingling with Hazel's fur. The officers worked slowly, speaking in low, reassuring voices. Hazel was sedated, her struggles fading to stillness. They carried her out, wrapped in Maggie's old raincoat, and placed her gently in a padded crate. As the van pulled away, Maggie stood in the driveway, arms wrapped around herself, grief and relief crashing over her in equal measure. The house behind her felt larger, emptier. The wind sighed through the trees. Letting go, Maggie realized, wasn't weakness. It was the final, hardest act of love she could give. The wildlife van rolled away from Maggie's driveway, tires crunching the thin layer of ice that had settled overnight. Maggie stood on the porch long after it was gone, arms wrapped tight around herself. For a moment, the world was unbearably still. The only sound the wind through the pines, and the distant hush of Willow Pond, invisible beyond the rows of houses and tangled brush. The house behind her seemed to breathe, exhaling loneliness. Inside, the fire still crackled, and Hazel's scent lingered on the quilt and in the folds of Maggie's old raincoat. Maggie bent down and picked up the jacket from where the officer had left it, cradling it in her arms as if she could draw out the last warmth of Hazel's body. Her hands shook, and the ache that rose in her chest was sharp and deep, an emptiness that threatened to swallow her whole. She wandered the house in a daze, tidying up the blankets, washing Hazel's bowls, wiping muddy paw prints from the kitchen floor. Every small task was a thread tying her to the past few weeks, the strange, beautiful interlude when her quiet life had collided with wildness. She touched the bandage wrappers on the bathroom counter, paused at the window where Hazel used to sit and watch the birds, and felt the loss in her bones. But there was something else, too. A lightness she hadn't expected, like a door opening inside her. The constant tension was gone. She could breathe again, though each breath ached with memory. Maggie found herself standing at the back door, peering out at the cold, gray morning, half expecting to see Hazel's silhouette on the fence, tail twitching, amber eyes shining. Hazel, meanwhile, was beginning her own new journey. The ride to the rehab center was a blur. Voices, the smell of antiseptic, the steady vibration of the van. She came to in a warm, dimly lit room, a soft blanket beneath her. The sound of water trickling somewhere nearby. Her muscles felt heavy, her mind foggy. She bared her teeth as hands approached, but they were gentle, practiced. These new humans spoke quietly, worked quickly, and left her with space to rest. Days passed, marked by the rhythms of the center. The air was rich with the scents of other wild animals: fox, raccoon, the distant tang of deer. Hazel's leg was cleaned and checked, her meals regular and nourishing. Still, she paced the boundaries of her pen, searching for a way out, drawn by a memory she couldn't name. She missed the old woman's voice, the scent of wood smoke, the quiet safety of the quilt. But something in her, the part that remembered the forest and the hunt, told her this was not home. Back in Coyote Ridge, Maggie's friends checked in, bringing casseroles and stories, filling her kitchen with voices and laughter. At first, she was grateful for the company, anything to fill the emptiness left by Hazel's absence. But when the guests left, the house settled back into its old, familiar silence. Maggie wandered from room to room, restless, unable to shake the feeling that she was missing something vital. On the third day, Maggie drove out to the edge of town. The wildlife center stood at the end of a gravel road, set against the foothills that rose blue and distant. She parked her car and sat for a long time, hands gripping the wheel. The urge to go inside and demand news of Hazel was overwhelming, but she hesitated, knowing that the wildcat needed space, not more human interference. Instead, Maggie walked the fence line, searching for a glimpse of Hazel through the mesh and tangled undergrowth. She saw a flicker of movement, a tawny shape, barely visible in the shadows. Hazel lifted her head, ears pricking, and for one heartbeat, Maggie was sure their eyes met. But just as quickly, Hazel turned away, vanishing into the maze of logs and leaves. Maggie pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the ache shift just a little. Hazel was safe, cared for, and as ready for the future as she could be. That had to be enough. The days rolled by. Maggie fell into a new routine, waking early to walk by Willow Pond, the same place where she'd first found Hazel fighting for her life. The air was cold and fresh, the mud frozen now, but Maggie still saw traces of that desperate morning. Claw marks on a root, a tuft of fur snagged on a branch. She sat by the water's edge, remembering, letting the sorrow rise and settle like the mist. There was no dramatic goodbye, no promise that Hazel would remember her, or even survive beyond the fences of the rehab center. Letting go was never easy, but Maggie discovered that it brought its own kind of hope, a faith that what she'd done mattered, even if she'd never see the results. Sometimes, late at night, she'd stand at her window and look out across the snowy yard, watching for movement on the edge of the dark. She knew Hazel was far away, but in the quiet, she could almost imagine the wildcat's presence, a flicker of amber eyes, a shadow slipping through the pines. And each time, Maggie would smile, sad, grateful, changed. Her home felt emptier, yes, but it also felt larger, as if by saving Hazel she'd made space for something new. For the first time in a long while, Maggie allowed herself to believe that goodbyes were not always the end. Sometimes, she thought, they were the edge of a new beginning. Time at the rehabilitation center was measured in small, hard-won steps. Hazel, though her wounds slowly knit and her strength began to return, was not the same Bobcat who'd once prowled Willow Pond's tangled banks. Some changes the staff could see. The way she kept to the shadows of her enclosure, flinching from the touch of even the gentlest hands. The strange, restless longing in her eyes as she gazed at the woods beyond the fence. The way she would sit unmoving for hours, alert, nose quivering at every breeze. But recovery is never a straight line, and wildness isn't something that can be mended with stitches and patience alone. At first, Hazel refused the food set out by her new caretakers, only taking a bite here or there when she thought no one was watching. She curled into herself, hiding in the darkest corner, silent and still. Yet with every day, as her body healed and her mind adjusted to new rhythms, something inside her seemed to flicker back to life. She tested her boundaries. A step further into the sunbeam, a sudden, powerful leap onto a log, claws flexing as if she remembered what it was to run free. The staff, a team of seasoned wildlife professionals, watched her closely. "She's got spirit, this one," murmured a tech as Hazel scaled a mesh wall and landed balanced tail high. "But she's got scars too." They knew not every animal that came through their doors could be returned to the wild, but Hazel, despite her caution and the mark of captivity, seemed determined to reclaim her place in the world beyond cages. Meanwhile, Maggie found herself wrestling with a new, unfamiliar quiet. Without Hazel's presence, the old routines of her life felt faded, as if someone had dialed down the color. She kept the living room spotless, unable to stand the reminders, the missing weight on the quilt, the silent space by the fire. Some days she busied herself in the garden, turning the cold, damp earth with hands that ached from more than age. Other times, she wandered the woods, searching for a sense of connection to the wild heart she'd helped save. The loss was real and raw, but with it came something Maggie hadn't expected, a deeper understanding of her own limits and hopes. She realized that helping Hazel had never really been about control or the fantasy of keeping something wild forever close. It had been about giving what she could: shelter, food, warmth, a second chance, and then trusting life to do the rest. That was the hardest lesson of all. Maggie had always wanted to fix things: students' broken spirits, her son's loneliness, the slow fade of her husband's laughter. But now, as she sat with the ache of Hazel's absence, she saw that real love was not about holding tight, but about letting go when the time came. On a rainy afternoon, she found herself writing a letter, never sent, to the staff at the rehab center. "Please tell Hazel I think of her every day," she wrote. "I hope she finds her way home. I hope in some small way she remembers the warmth of my hands." Maggie set the letter aside, knowing it was more for her than for anyone else. At the center, Hazel's rehabilitation took a subtle turn. She was given more space to roam, more opportunities to test her agility and instincts. Sometimes, late at night, the staff would hear her calling, a throaty, wild yowl that echoed through the halls and sent shivers down their spines. They understood. The wild cannot be domesticated, only respected. One morning, a volunteer arrived to find Hazel pressed against the fence, watching the sunrise, every muscle taut with anticipation. When the gate was opened for her exercise time, she exploded into motion, running the perimeter with a power and grace that made the watching humans fall silent. She was, at last, herself again, a creature of the untamed, longing not for comfort, but for freedom. For Maggie, the lesson echoed in quieter ways. She began to reach out to her neighbors, sharing stories, helping in small ways. A casserole for Mrs. Devlin, a ride to the doctor for old Mr. Peabody. Her kindness, once reserved for strays and wild things, began to ripple outward. She realized that real connection didn't mean keeping. It meant caring, even when the result was loss. That act of courage, giving space, respecting another's journey, became the heart of her days. Sometimes she'd pause by the window, looking at the place where Hazel had once watched the world go by, and smile. "You saved me too, you know," she'd whisper. For in helping Hazel heal, Maggie had found herself stronger, less afraid of her own scars, more willing to risk her heart for the sake of something wild. The world kept spinning. Hazel's story, Maggie realized, was not a simple parable. It was messy, complicated, filled with failures and small triumphs. And that was the true nature of kindness. It thrived not in certainty, but in the willingness to try, to risk, to hope even when the outcome was unknown. Both Hazel and Maggie carried their scars, but now they also carried the knowledge that wildness and kindness could exist side by side. Healing, Maggie discovered, was not a straight path, but a journey with unexpected gifts, trust, courage, and the quiet power of letting go. And sometimes, if she listened very closely in the hush of evening, Maggie thought she could hear, far away, the cry of a wildcat, strong and free. The morning of Hazel's release dawned clear and brisk, the sky a deep, limitless blue over the foothills of New Mexico. The staff at the rehabilitation center moved quietly, speaking in soft voices out of respect. For Hazel, for the wild, for the uncertain miracle of second chances. They carried out the last checks, the healed leg, the steady heartbeat, the flash of spirit in her amber eyes. Hazel was ready. She'd been ready for days, and they all felt it. A restless tension in her movements, a yearning in her gaze every time she stared out through the mesh toward the world beyond. Maggie woke early, nerves fluttering in her chest like birds. She'd been told the day before that Hazel would be released somewhere safe, far from the dangers of highways and towns, in a quiet corner of the foothills. She didn't know the exact spot. The staff kept it private to protect the animals. But Maggie understood. The wild was not hers to claim. She packed a thermos of coffee, a battered pair of binoculars, and drove out of town, windows rolled down, letting the cold wind clear her mind. The air was full of spring, damp earth, the sharp sweetness of new grass, the distant song of a meadowlark. Maggie parked near the sanctuary's border, stood by the fence, and waited. She felt both foolish and hopeful, searching for a sign that might never come. A little before noon, a white van pulled up in a clearing miles away from the center, watched over by 2 wildlife rangers and a silent volunteer. They opened Hazel's crate and stepped back. Hazel hesitated at the threshold, muscles taut, nose quivering. For a long moment she simply breathed the open air, tasting freedom in the wind, feeling the sun on her whiskers. Then, in a sudden blur of motion, Hazel leapt from the crate. She bounded into the tall grass, every stride filled with strength and memory and the wildness that had never truly left her. She paused at the edge of the trees, looking back just once, eyes sharp, coat gleaming in the light. Then she was gone, vanishing into the hush and shadow of the forest, swallowed up by the world that had shaped her. The rangers watched in silence, smiles tugging at their lips, hearts pounding with the kind of joy only possible when a rescue story ends as it should. "She's got a good chance," one murmured. "She's tougher than most." Maggie stood at her own stretch of fence, far away but feeling the moment in her bones. She squinted through her binoculars at the rolling land, seeing nothing but grass and shadow, but her heart told her Hazel was out there, alive, wild, free. She imagined Hazel's last look, the way hope and gratitude could exist without words. After a long while, Maggie turned and walked back to her car, feeling lighter than she had in years. There was sadness. Yes, a bittersweet ache that would never quite fade. But there was also a fullness, a sense of having been part of something bigger, something beautiful and unfinished. She visited the sanctuary's border often in the weeks that followed. Sometimes she'd catch a glimpse of movement in the brush, a flash of tawny fur, a pair of golden eyes glinting at dusk. She never called out. She knew Hazel needed her distance now. But every time she visited, Maggie felt a quiet thrill, a surge of pride and humility and love. At home, Maggie's routines changed. She no longer moved in a haze of grief. Instead, she found herself more present with her neighbors, more patient with herself. She volunteered at the local shelter, offering what comfort she could to lost animals and frightened people alike. Her world, once defined by loss, felt softer now, stitched together with moments of kindness and unexpected joy. The story of Hazel's rescue rippled through Coyote Ridge, changing things in small but lasting ways. Children played at the pond, pretending to save wild animals. Neighbors who once eyed Maggie with suspicion now brought her fresh bread and garden vegetables, stopping to chat on her porch. Even Mrs. Devlin, who'd once warned Maggie about wild animals, asked her for advice on caring for a stray kitten. And Maggie, every time she told the story, made sure to end it with a lesson. We don't always get to keep what we love, but sometimes giving it a second chance, no matter how messy or hard or uncertain, is the bravest thing we can do. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold behind the foothills, Maggie took a long walk by Willow Pond. She paused at the very spot where she'd first found Hazel, mud-splattered and desperate, clinging to life. The grass had grown back, green and lush, and birds sang from the branches overhead. Maggie knelt and pressed her palm to the earth, whispering a thank you. To Hazel, to the wild, to the pain and hope and wonder that made life worth living. She stood, brushed the dirt from her knees, and smiled as a breeze danced through her hair. For a moment, she thought she heard the faintest yowl on the wind, a wild, joyful sound echoing through the dusk. Maggie's heart lifted. She knew, deep down, that every act of rescue, animal or human, sent ripples through the world, touching lives she'd never know, changing things in ways she couldn't imagine. Hazel was gone, but her presence lingered, as wild and bright as the New Mexico sky. The land, the people, the animals, they were all in this together. And as Maggie walked home beneath the stars, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. If you've ever risked your heart for something wild, you know the courage it takes, and the reward that's never guaranteed. But sometimes, the hardest things, the scariest chances, become the very moments that set you free. Maybe you found yourself standing at the edge of something wild and hurting, unsure whether to step forward or turn away. Maybe, like Maggie O'Donnell, you know the weight of silence in a too big house, the echo of loss, and the slow, hard work of risking your heart again. Or maybe you're more like Hazel, scarred, cautious, fierce with the instinct to survive, but still longing for a second chance you're not even sure you deserve. I can't tell you exactly what this story means for you, but I can tell you what it's meant for me, and for Maggie, and for anyone who's ever chosen kindness when it would have been easier to walk on by. For Maggie, life moved on, but it moved differently. There were still days when she missed the sound of paws on the floor, the sight of golden eyes watching from the corner. But the ache of missing Hazel was softer now, wrapped up in gratitude. She filled her days with purpose, tending her garden, reading to kids at the library, volunteering at the animal shelter on weekends. She made friends she'd never have known if not for the wildcat that once took shelter in her living room. Neighbors stopped by more often, some with questions about animals, some just for a cup of coffee. They asked about Hazel, and Maggie would tell them the truth. Not a fairy tale, but the real story. The messy, sometimes painful, always hopeful journey they'd both survived. She spoke about what she'd learned, how helping someone, animal or human, wasn't about controlling the outcome. It was about showing up, giving what you could, and letting life take its course. That was enough. At the Wildlife Center, Hazel's legend lingered. Staff who'd once doubted her ability to return to the wild swapped stories about her, sometimes exaggerating her escape attempts or her uncanny sense for knowing when someone was watching. She became a symbol, a reminder that even the most broken creatures could heal, if given time and respect. There were other animals who came and went, but Hazel's memory seemed to hum through the place, as if her spirit had left something behind. The seasons changed. The foothills turned from green to gold, and then to frost. Maggie kept visiting the sanctuary fence every now and then, hoping for a glimpse, always content even when she saw nothing at all. Sometimes, just as dusk painted the sky, she'd spot a movement at the edge of the trees, a flash of tawny fur, the briefest glimmer of amber eyes. She'd stand very still, heart full, whispering a blessing on the wind. "Be safe out there, Hazel. The world is yours again." But the story didn't end there. If anything, it began to ripple out, changing Maggie, her neighbors, and maybe in small ways, her whole town. Coyote Ridge became a little kinder, a little braver. People noticed lost animals and stray souls more often. There was less talk of nuisance and more talk of help. Maggie started a community project to clean up Willow Pond, and kids who once played at rescue games began to show up with trash bags and big plans. And maybe you're listening to this, wondering what any of it has to do with your life. Maybe you've got your own Hazel story, a person, an animal, or a cause you almost gave up on, but didn't. Or maybe you've never stepped forward, never reached out, because the risk felt too big or the reward too uncertain. But here's the truth. Every living thing deserves a chance, even when it's messy, hard, and uncertain. Kindness is not weakness. It's the seed of all real change. The courage to care, to step into the unknown, is how worlds are remade, one small act at a time. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or even your questions. Maybe you've lost something, or someone, and wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. Maybe you're afraid to try, but sometimes, all it takes is a single moment of compassion to open a door you never expected. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Tell your children about Hazel and Maggie and the wild things that cross our paths when we least expect them. Let it remind you that though you can't save everything or everyone, you can always choose to be the one who tries. And sometimes, that's enough to change a life, maybe even your own. The world is full of wounded things. Some walk on 4 legs, some on 2. Some roar, some whisper. Most fight, right to the very end, for their chance. For every Hazel in the wild, there is a Maggie watching from the shadows, ready to do something brave. Tonight, the foothills are quiet. The pond reflects the stars. Somewhere out there, a bobcat slinks through the grass, stronger for all she's endured, freer for all she's lost and gained. And in a small house at the edge of Coyote Ridge, a woman sits by the fire, heart wide open, grateful for what was and what still could be. If you've ever risked your heart for something wild, you know the courage it takes and the reward that's never guaranteed. You know how loss and hope can sit side by side, making you braver than you ever thought you could be. So here's my invitation to you. Take your chance. Offer your hand. Be patient with the messy, the scared, the wild. You never know who might need you or how, in reaching out, you might just save yourself.